Kia ora, welcome to my second ever baking vlog. This is another no recipe style video, and today we're going to make some rustic éclairs, profiteroles or choux pastry depending on what you call it. This is good for your standard French éclairs, or you can make your Mexican style churros with the same batter. What you will need to start your recipe is a cup of water, about 125 grams of diced butter. Here I'm using salted butter, but unsalted would also be fine. And we're going to pop that in a medium-sized saucepan. Some people put in their sugar at this stage, but I tend to add it afterwards. It's just how I've always done it. We're going to take this over to the stove and we're going to put it on a medium heat, and while it's on the stove we want it to come up to a simmer and we want all of the butter to melt. If you used unsalted butter, now would be your time to add in some salt to your taste. I've opted to add in another half a teaspoon of salt. And we're just going to let this slowly come up to a simmer and make sure all of the butter is fully melted. This can take a little while, but you don't want it boiling. So now as the water and butter comes up to a simmer, we can get ready to add in our cup of flour. In this case I have not sifted this flour, but you'd be much better off if you did. I would recommend sifting it onto a piece of baking paper and then you can dump it in from there. So once you've added in your cup of flour, if you can just give it a really good mix, and you want to make sure all of the flour, water and butter is combined. You'll know that you've done it correctly when it's come away from the sides and you've got a defined ball. Do this on the stove, unlike some other recipes you may see. This is so that we know that the flour has fully cooked out, otherwise you can still get a bit of a raw flour taste when you fully bake off your pastry. Once you've taken it off the heat, we do need to let the pastry completely cool down so that when we add the eggs they do not scramble. In this time it's quite good to measure out some of your other ingredients. I'm going to add in a couple tablespoons of sugar straight into the dough while it's cooling down, as well as a capful or about a teaspoon of vanilla essence. If we combine that in, it will speed up the cooling process. The more that you can move it around, the faster it will cool. It will also cool faster if you were to transfer it into a separate bowl or into the bowl of your stand mixer, as the residual heat from the pot is going to slow down this process. I don't really feel like doing the dishes though, so we're going to let it cool in this pot, and in that time we're going to prep our eggs. I'm using 4 small eggs and I'm just going to crack those into a separate bowl. That way, if any of the shells fall in, it's all contained into that bowl and I can get them out rather than doing it straight into my dough. And we'll just break those up. And if we can give it another mix, make sure that it's coming down in temperature, and enjoy our cup of tea. Once it's cooled, we're going to slowly add in our egg and give it a good mix in until it is fully combined. This can take a bit of effort and elbow grease, but you do just need to slowly and gradually add your egg mixture in. Some people prefer to do this using a wooden spoon or a whisk. In this case I find a silicone spatula to be fine. If I was doing a much larger batch, a stand mixer would be ideal for this part of the process, as it is quite the arm workout to combine those eggs into the pastry. This is also quite a good task if you've got kids, as they like to take turns combining the eggs in with the pastry. Here I am just using some baking paper lined baking sheets, and I'm going to use tablespoons and just spoon my mixture out. You could also pipe this out, or you could use some teaspoons to make some smaller profiteroles, great for doing something like a croquembouche, where you need lots of small pastry rather than these larger dessert size ones. You will notice as I spoon them out, there's quite a few peaks on my pastry. If I wanted a smoother end result, I could wet my finger and just smooth those out, but that again is personal preference. Perfect, and once it is all spooned out, we are going to pop that into a preheated oven. We want it preheated at about 180 degrees Celsius, and they are going to go in for 25 to 35 minutes depending on the size of your pastries. Perfect, and then once they're fully baked, so there should be a nice golden colour like this, we want to take them out and pop them on a cooling rack. They will also benefit from a hole poked into the bottom as they're cooling, so here I'm just getting a nice clean cloth and a skewer so that I can poke a hole in the bottom of each éclair. Depending on the size of the hole you make, it could also be beneficial if you were choosing to pipe the filling into these instead of slicing them open. But the main idea is that the hole should help release any excess steam inside the pastry. Now we're going to chuck a cover on these and let them cool completely before we do anything else. As you can see here, my little pop-up cover has broken after opening it up, so we'll just tie that back on, and it's still good to use. Now you can see it is much later in the day and the pastry is fully cooled, so we can ice them. Here I'm just making a really simple icing sugar, cocoa powder and some hot water, and we are just going to spoon this on. You could also make a ganache or a different flavoured icing to top these off, but this is the style I grew up with and what I always look forward to when it comes to éclairs. You could also at this stage put some of these into a Ziploc bag and you could freeze them for future use. And here you can see them fully iced, and I've left a few uniced just to be able to pop into storage if we don't get around to eating them all. If I were to freeze them, I would freeze the uniced pastries. Now for the filling, In this case, I'm just going to pop in some whipped cream, some chantilly cream, which is cream sweetened with a little bit of icing sugar and a bit of vanilla essence. And as I'm making quite a small amount, I am just going to hand whisk that in this case. I do recommend, if you're going to hand whisk, to use a much larger bowl than you think you'd need for such a small amount of cream. It will make whisking a lot easier and faster as you've got a bit more surface area to work with. Perfect, and now for the filling. What we're going to do is grab your iced éclair, and we're just going to take a sharp knife and cut it open, probably about 80% of the way, still leaving a little bit of a lip so that you can hinge it open and closed. And as you can see, it's nice and hollow on the inside, ready to be filled, and we are just going to add in a couple spoonfuls of our whipped cream. Make sure not to overfill it, as otherwise all of the cream will come out the sides when you try to go and eat it. But as you can see, this is the end result of my chocolate eclairs with whipped cream. If you enjoyed, please like, comment and subscribe, and leave a recommendation of what you'd like to see me make in the future down in the comments. Thanks, bye.